the team Forestry Research Collaboration. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Wilma Latuni. I am Head of International Office Pattimura University. The Honorable Rector of Pattimura University, Vice Rectors of Pattimura University, our speakers, Professor Dr. John Ines, Dean of Faculty of Forestry, University of British Columbia, Professor Dr. Jeff Sayer, Dr. Agni Clintuni Budi Hartono, Profesor Dr. Insinyur Agustinus Castanya MS, Profesor Dr. Gun Mariat Moko MP, distinguished guests of this online webinar. Before the webinar starts, we would like to invite Rector of Pattimura University to deliver the opening speech to Professor Dr. M.J. Sapteno, SHM Hum. Time is yours.
Yeah. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome today in the webinar education fair with the title Forestry Research Collaboration. For our information, today webinar education fair is Pattimura University in partnership with Universities of British Columbia. The Honorable Vice Rector of Pattimura University, the Head and Secretary of Pattimura University Senate, our speaker, Professor Dr. John Ines, Dean of Faculty of Forestry, University of Columbia, British Columbia, Professor Dr. Jeff Sayer and Dr. Agni Clintuni Budi Hartono, which all from University of British Columbia, Professor Dr. Engineer Agus Castanya MS and Professor Dr. Engineer Gun Mudiarmoko MP, which all from Pattimura University. All this of today webinar education. Ladies and gentlemen, as the rector, I would like to express thank you to International Office of Pattimura University who has arranged today webinar education fair, which I believe is very important to give new insight about research collaboration, especially in the fields of forestry. Ladies and gentlemen, Pattimura University is a higher education institution that holds education, research, and community service activity as its main task. In the field of research, Pattimura University has made many cooperation under memorandum of understanding with the university in Asia, Australia, Europe, and America. One of the cooperation is in the field of forestry with University of British Columbia. Therefore, I believe that throughout this webinar, we all will get information about collaborative field research in forest landscape with high conservation values. Opportunity to get contact with supervisor of research between both university, especially in the field of agriculture for joint collaboration and also information related to sustainable agriculture. Ladies and gentlemen, according to the agenda, I hope today webinar will be run smoothly and continuously, so that giving much benefit to all of us. And once again, I would like to thank you to all speakers, Professor Dr. John Ines, Professor Jeff Sayer, Dr. Agni Clintuni Budi Hartono, Professor Dr. Agus Castanya, Professor Dr. Gun Mardiatmoko, who has been willing to share a very important to beneficial knowledge for us throughout this webinar. I also would like to say thank you to the participant who has given their times to attend and participate in this webinar. Finally, by saying thanks to the Almighty God, I officially open today webinar education fair with the title Forestry Research Collaboration. May God bless us all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Teno. Dear audience, we now turn into our main agenda, the presentation by our speakers. This session will be guided by moderator Dr. Insinyur Audrey Letemia, MSc, lecturer at Faculty of Agriculture, and also head of Agricultural Science Postgraduate Program. Mrs. Letemia has her PhD degree from University of British Columbia, Canada. To Ibu Audrey, time is yours. Please unmute your microphone, Ibu.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mrs. Latsuni. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, the speakers and participants in Indonesia, and good afternoon for the speakers and the participants in Canada and in the United States. Today we will have 4 presentation with 5 speakers, 3 from the University of British Columbia, Canada, and 2 from University of Pattimura in Ambon. As shown on the screen, we will have 20 minutes each for each presentation, and the first presentation will be delivered by Professor Dr. John Innes, and followed by the discussion, 10 minutes discussion. Before we start, I'm going to introduce Professor Dr. John Innes. Professor Dr. John Innes is the Dean of the Faculty of the Forestry, University of British Columbia. He is actively involved with climate change research, particularly effects on forest ecosystem. In 2007, he was part of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change team that shared the Nobel Peace Prize with Al Gore. Professor Dr. John Innes teaches in the field of international and sustainable forest at the University of British Columbia. Under his leadership, the Faculty of Forestry has taken significant steps toward broadening the curricula and academic content to reflect changing realities in the forest and conservation sectors. Having worked in Britain and Switzerland in the past, he's interested in how management practices are changing in different countries in response to international issues such as the conservation of biodiversity and climate change. Today, Professor Innes is going to present a talk entitled Experience in International Forestry Collaboration with China and India. You have 20 minutes to present your talk. Professor Innes, time is yours.
Thank you very much, Audrey, for that. And I'd like to say hello to everyone who's here. Good morning to those in Indonesia. Good evening to those in North America. I haven't prepared a PowerPoint for this particular talk because I find PowerPoint and Zoom pretty exhausting, and I think it's better just to look at a face and listen to someone talking. There are 2 really main areas of cooperation that we have been practicing in India and in China. I should say that the level of cooperation with China is much more advanced than with India, but the Indian cooperation is a very different form. We really have 2 main areas of cooperation, and one is concerning research, and the other concerns teaching and learning. On the research side, we have had a large number of students who have come from China to undertake PhDs or undergraduate degrees at the University of British Columbia under the China Scholarship Council program. And I say a large number, there's been about 35 to 40 students altogether under that. We have also undertaken research in China and in India. I have active research projects in both. They are generally funded through agencies in Canada and involve partnerships with universities or research institutes in India and China. In India, our primary partner has been the Wildlife Institute of India, and our secondary partner has been the Forest Research Institute in Dehradun, which is a national institution. There's also a deemed university associated with that institute, and we've been involved with teaching and have done many of the partnerships that I'll describe in a minute have been done with that university in Dehradun. Individuals at UBC have undertaken research in China and in India. Generally, those research projects have followed on from contacts that have been made between individuals, either through the teaching program or through conferences and the normal ways that academics interact. So moving on to teaching, this is actually a fairly deep list of areas. And so I will start, I think, with the youngest people first. So that's the undergraduates. We have the usual situation of individual undergraduates coming to the University of British Columbia as a private individual, and they do a 4-year degree, and that's very standard. We have Indonesian students, we have a range of students who choose to do that. However, that's entirely voluntary, it's on their terms, they choose which university to visit. We have a number of scholarships that we have introduced to specifically encourage such students. More interestingly, perhaps, is that with a number of universities in China, and in particular, Beijing Forestry University, Nanjing Forestry University, Zhejiang Agriculture and Forestry University, Fujian Agriculture and Forestry University, and the Northwest Agriculture and Forestry University, we have what we call 2+2 programs. Under this system, a student will spend 2 years at their home university, where they will do a special program, generally that involves additional courses in English. And then they come to UBC for their final 2 years. You might ask, what's the advantage for the home university in that? Well, they charge those students more when the students are actually going through the program because they give them additional courses, particularly in English. Under the terms of the agreement with the Ministry of Education in China, we actually commit to teaching a number of those courses in China. So we send our faculty members to China to teach the students who are coming to UBC at a later stage. And that introduces those students to the teaching system. Generally, the faculty members will go for a 2 or 3 week period, and they will give an intensive course, usually at the end of term in China. Those individuals who do travel to China are entertained while they're there. They meet people, they interact with professors there, and very often that leads to research partnerships, and very often it leads to the co-supervision of graduate students. So there's a lot of knock-on effects that occur with this. The students who come here after their 2 years at a home university have to do 60 credits. That's 30 credits a year. And after that, they are entitled to a UBC degree. We also know that they are receiving degrees from their home institutions as well. So they are getting a double degree, although it's not officially recognized as a double degree. The students pay international fees, but we have an arrangement with each of the universities where we give scholarships to every single student so that they actually get some of those fees back. It seems a bit silly or strange system to say to someone, for example, we want you to pay $30,000 and then we give them back $5,000, but it's also good for them. They see, oh, I win a scholarship, I get $5,000, I'm very successful. I think that's partly because the money goes to the student and the fees are paid by their parents very often. Moving on, we have a number of graduate level interactions. we have been offering a number of one-year graduate courses where a student can get a Master's of Forestry, and Intu and Jeff Sayer will maybe talk about that a bit more because they lead one of those programs, the International Forestry Program. And that has proven very attractive, particularly to 2+2 students, because in China now, having a degree from a Western university doesn't have the same cachet as it used to. And increasingly, employers are looking for a master's degree. So we are exploring ways now that we could maybe interact, have those 2+2+1 arrangements, where maybe a student can get the credit for some of the courses they've done and extend it into the graduate program. That's something that hasn't been agreed on yet. We're still working out how we might do that. One of the conditions that we have is that we train, so that we go to China to give some of those courses. And that's a pretty big commitment. The agreement is 8 courses per degree program. And we have 5 degree programs, so that's 40 courses. 40 of my faculty members need to go to China for 2 to 3 weeks a year. And clearly that's unsustainable, particularly under COVID conditions. So we've been working out ways that we can maybe move around that requirement, which came from the government rather than the universities. One of the ways we've been doing that is by training faculty members. So we have young faculty members from those partner universities come to UBC, generally for 1 year, and they partner with a professor here. We require that each of those people write at least 1 paper while they're here with the professor that they are partnered with. They also attend a lot of courses. They sit in on both undergraduate and graduate level courses. They learn how material is delivered. They see the standards. They actually do the tests and so on. They do it as if they were a student. So they get a full experience that they can then take back to their home institutions. And when someone teaches a course that they have learned here back in their home university, that counts as one of our courses. So we reduced that number of 8 required courses a little bit. We've also been developing a lot of online resources, and just like I suspect many of you are doing, that has suddenly accelerated in the last 9 months because of COVID. But before COVID, we were actually in the process of developing a number of courses, and we had a rather interesting program that was a partnership between multiple universities in the Asia Pacific region. It included the University of the Philippines, Los Baños, Beijing Forestry University, the University of Melbourne, University Putra, Malaysia, University of Florida, University of California, Berkeley, and UBC. And so we've all been developing courses which we put onto a single platform. And some of those courses have then been adopted and delivered locally by the partner universities. And in fact, those courses are actually open to all of you because they are through the Asia Pacific Forestry Network and they're being made available. So we do that lecturer training. At a higher level, we will invite people to come and spend time here where they simply work with someone who then goes and works in either India or China and basically forms a research partnership. And then at basically the oldest level of students would be the mature teaching that we do. And this is basically a form of continuing education. And we do it with both China and with India. In China, it tends to be a on-demand exercise. So for example, we may have a forest bureau in a particular city. We'll say we would like to send a small delegation of 8 to 10 to 15 people to learn about a particular topic. It might be forest fires, it might be use of drones, it might be silvicultural techniques, could be nursery techniques, whatever. And we will put on a custom built course for them. So they tell us what they want and we will deliver what we can. And if we can't deliver it, we will point them in the direction of an institution that can deliver it. We have a more formal arrangement with India, which has been an on and off because it's a competitive contract that we didn't win in the last round, but we are pretty confident that we will get it again because the Indians chose to award it to Moscow University. And people from India have discovered that Moscow in February is not the nicest of places to be. It's rather cold, like -40. So they have actually, they prefer to come to Vancouver, which has got a much nicer climate at the time when these courses are run, which is in their summer and our winter. So what that involves generally is a partnership between universities and institutes. And so we form a consortium. It's with the deemed university in Dehradun, the Wildlife Institute of India, and the Forest Research Institute. And the students in those generally are mid to senior managers in the Indian Forest Service. And they will spend 2 weeks in North America learning about systems here. It's a very field-based experience. They go to log yards, they go to forestry operations, they visit community forests, and they basically see how things are done here. And then they go back to Dehradun, where they receive another 2 weeks of training. And we go back to Dehradun with them so that we can continue working with them during that period. At the same time, they have the staff from the deemed university and from the Wildlife Institute who can give them more context-specific information about the most up-to-date rules in India and so on, because obviously we are not so familiar with that. That partnership works very well. As I said, we didn't win the contract the last time round, but we are shortlisted to win it this time. Although they've changed the system a little and we have to have a bigger partnership, which includes Laos and the USA and Kenya and a number of other places. And so these students will be traveling around the world visiting forests, which sounds like a pretty nice experience for them. Our role will be very much like it was before. We spend a lot of time talking about issues like corruption. We have to do that very carefully because in the Indian Forest Service, there are very significant problems of corruption. And these are Indian Forest Service officers that we're talking to. So generally, we approach this problem by illustrating the types of corruption that we have encountered here in British Columbia and in Canada, and explaining how we identify it and then how we deal with it, rather than saying this is how you must deal with your problem in your country. So that really explains the different levels. We are a very outward-looking university. We have a very international faculty. Very few of our faculty members were actually trained at UBC or even in Canada. And we spend a lot of time doing research outside of Canada, a lot of time doing research with particularly Indigenous communities, but also in a number of other areas. That explains where we're at. I hope it's what you were looking for, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. I'm sure I've maybe pushed a few buttons that you might be interested in following up on.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor John Innes. You are just in 15 minutes. Thank you very much. We will have a discussion time, 10 minutes discussion. But before that, I want to say that Dr. Intu and Professor Jeff Sayer later will talk about the collaboration in Indonesia and UNPATTI, what have been done and what can we do in the future. But still, we open this time for discussion. Bapak Ibu bisa dalam bahasa Indonesia, nanti kami bisa membantu menerjemahkannya. Here we have Pak Rector and Vice Rector. If they want to say something or want to discuss something, please, Pak Rector, time is yours.
I don't have question because my job is a lawyer. About the forestry, I think forestry, especially for Dean of Agriculture Faculty, and question.
Thank you, Pak Rector. Pak Vice Dean, for collaboration, because Professor Ines talked about the collaboration with China and India. And is there any idea or any question you want to say, please, Pak Vice Rector?
Ya, boleh.
Ya.
Ya, makasih Ibu Audrey. Saya tertarik dengan kerjasama yang dibangun dengan China dan India dari UBC itu. Tapi dalam perjalanan sebenarnya melalui Prof. Agus Kastanya dengan Dr. itu sudah terjalin dan sudah beberapa kegiatan yang telah dilakukan di Universitas Pattimura. Kalau saya tidak salah sudah 2 kali dan pernah membawa mahasiswa beberapa orang yang dari Australia, masih di Australia. Nah, saya berharap ke depan bahwa MOU ini perlu ditindaklanjuti antara Universitas Pattimura dengan Universitas Columbia, British Columbia. Mungkin kerjasamanya yang lebih awal adalah bagaimana pengembangan sumber daya manusia. Saya lihat di Fakultas Pertanian, khususnya jurusan kehutanan, banyak sekali, saya bincang-bincang kemarin, banyak sekali teman-teman yang berkeinginan untuk melanjutkan studi di S3, tetapi terkendala dengan mungkin scholarship-nya. Berarti ada beasiswa-beasiswa mungkin yang bisa dikerjasamakan, mungkin dari UBC dapat mempersiapkan atau dapat memberikan kemudahan-kemudahan dengan beberapa penyedia dana atau pembiayaan yang dapat memfasilitasi sumber daya manusia dan Universitas Pattimura untuk kuliah di UBC, khususnya di forestry-nya. Makasih.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Ines. So our Vice Rector in collaboration, Phil said that he knows that there is already collaboration between UBC and Pattimura University. Ibu Intu and Professor Jeff Sawyer have been working through it, and there's a memorandum of understanding that have been signed. He said that if it can be a follow-up, especially for the development of human resources in Pattimura University by sending some lecturers to study at UBC, but the problem is the scholarship. Is there any way that UBC can provide some scholarship or some source of funding so our lecturers from University of Pattimura can go and study there?
Right now, I think it's rather limited. However, that's because we haven't asked. And generally what we've found is that we need to have a clear agreement with the university, and then we would go to a funder, such as the Canadian International Development Agency or IDRC, another Canadian agency, and talk to them about it and say, look, we would like to do this. This is what we plan on doing. Would you support it? And through that, they would actually look to not only providing scholarship, but to providing the full cost of people coming. Generally, we find with both those agencies is that they are very political and they have favored countries. And so it will depend whether or not Indonesia is on the list of favored countries or not. If it is, then it is easier. We also find that one of the things they often require is that rather than bringing people from Indonesia to UBC, which is very expensive, they prefer us to go to Indonesia or to whichever country. So we would go or come to you and spend some time with you and talk, give a course or whatever over a reasonably short period, maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, but very intensive during that time. And that's more efficient and a lower cost and less possibility for the system to be abused by any individuals. If we bring in 30 people, there's chances are one person may decide to go shopping instead of sitting in class. And so we are aware of that, but so are funding agencies, and so they prefer it the other way around, because if there's one person going to a country to teach, there's no way they can go shopping instead.
Okay, thank you, Professor Ines. Yeah, there are a couple more questions. One from Dr. Ron Ismail. He's asking, what are the main... Ya, oh Pak.
Bisa nggak diminta itu, Prof. John? Kita kan salah satu kekurangan kita itu adalah kurangnya dosen asing. Mungkin bisa diprogramkan dengan program studi di kehutanan untuk dapat meminta kesediaan Pak John untuk menjadi tenaga pengajar di jurusan kehutanan. Tenaga pengajar. Jadi kan lewat daring, kan tidak perlu terlalu banyak pembiayaan kan. Sehingga di dosen di jurusan kehutanan itu ada dosen asing yang mengajar.
Oh, oke. Exchange, ya.
Pak Prof. John Ines itu untuk mengajar dan dimasukkan di dalam jadwal di kurikulumnya, di jadwal pengajarnya jurusan kehutanan. Ya. Jadi kayak pertukaran didampingi oleh siapa dosen lokal. Ya, minta kesediaannya untuk menjadi dosen pengajar di.
Oke. Professor Ines, there are one more things from a vice rector that if it's possible, there's like exchange lecturer from the. So the lecturer from University of British Columbia can give teach a course here at the Forestry Department, Pattimura University, with some lecturer from our university, like team teaching.
Yes, that is possible. Ideally, it's best done if the course is a short course, rather than one that's stretched out for an entire semester, so that the lecturer doesn't have to be there for the entire semester. So in China, what we have found best is that someone will come and they will give a course for 2 weeks. They spend every day, all day, working with the students. So they will generally teach in the morning and then sit with the students and discuss papers and other materials in the afternoon. So it's quite tiring for the person. And so we usually need to find an incentive to encourage that person to go. And generally, we will cover the cost of the airfare for our people to fly to, if it's in the cases in China, as the examples that we have. But then the person very often develops research in China with a partner there. So, for example, if I knew there was a person who worked in my research area, and I saw the possibility of doing some joint research in Indonesia with them, that would be an added incentive for me to come. And that would be the same for anyone, I think. Intu has her own incentive because she has a house in Indonesia. That's different. For the rest of us who don't have houses in Bali or anywhere, then there's less. We need to usually find a good reason to come. A very good reason for me personally is that I do a couple of courses on tropical forest ecology. And so just getting to Indonesia is advantageous to me, as long as I can get out into some forest somewhere.
Okay, thank you, Famus. Famus, bagaimana? Okay, thank you, Professor Ines. There are a couple more questions. We still have like 5 minutes. So question from Dr. Ronnie Mile. He's asking, what are the main topics on various courses that UBC given in China? And recently, what is the main focus of UBC forestry research topics?
That's an incredibly difficult question to answer, because we have 85 professors now. And we cover almost every area of forestry, from genetics through basic tree physiology to traditional forestry, forest operations, forest engineering, through forest ecology into conservation and even marine conservation now within the program. And we also have a wood engineering department that does wood properties and increasingly looks at how to break down wood into its constituent properties, such as nanocrystalline cellulose. We also have a group who are working on wood buildings and tall wood buildings, how we can build 15, 20, even 30-story buildings out of wood. So we go all the way from the gene to massive wood buildings and everything in between. There is very few areas that we don't cover, but there are some areas that we do better than others.
Okay. And what are the main topics on the various courses that UBC given in China, Professor?
Well, they have varied. Because we have graduate students, or students from China coming into all of our undergraduate programs, we've had to send faculty members covering all of those different areas that we do into China. So we've had basic physiology, we've had soils, we've done fairly low grade, first, second year undergraduates. We've had advanced courses in genetics, we've had advanced courses in phylogeny, wood engineering, wood properties. So we cover the full range of courses when we go to China, depending on what they have asked for. It's very rare to find something that we cannot find someone who could teach in that area. We used to have one gap, which was important for China, which was bamboo, but we now have a bamboo specialist working on faculty who happens to be Chinese, so it's even better because he can actually teach in Chinese.
Okay. Okay, there are some more questions, but I think it's really related to the collaboration between UBC and Indonesia, and Ibu Intu and Pak Jeff gonna talk about it and explain more. So I think I'm gonna, yeah. So we just have a perfect time. We finish on time, and as a token of our gratitude of thank you, we're gonna give you just the e-certificate, Professor Ines, e-certificate. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor John Ines, for your time. You spent time and you explained. We hope that we're going to have more collaboration in the future with the UBC. And I'm also as an alumni of UBC, I'm so happy that we can have the collaboration. Thank you very much. We give a big applause to Professor John Ines.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to move to the second presentation is by Professor Dr. Jeff Sawyer. So I'm going to introduce Pak Jeff. Professor Dr. Jeff Sawyer is an expert in the field of tropical forest conservation. His research aims to achieve practical conservation impacts in tropical environments. He leads several long-term researches in sentinel landscapes in Indonesia and Central Africa. These are landscapes with high biodiversity values and levels of threat where people live in poverty. He works with local universities, NGOs, and communities to find development pathways that improve local livelihoods while maintaining biodiversity. He adopts a landscape approach and aims to promote vibrant economics coexisting with biodiversity natural habitats. His research aims to influence local, national, and global policies on forest conservation. Today, Professor Jeff Sawyer is going to talk about sentinel landscapes in Indonesia. You have 20 minutes for presentations. Time is yours.
Thank you very much, Ibu Audrey, and good morning to Pak Rector and all my friends, especially Pak Agus and Pak Gun, and I think quite a few other people who I've met on my various visits to Pattimura. It's very nice to see you. I would have actually preferred to be physically with you in Ambon, and that's not possible. I've been coming pretty frequently to Ambon for the last 5 years, and I've enjoyed it very much. I've met lots of very interesting people. And the area where you live, the islands of Maluku, Wallacea, are extremely interesting to people like myself as biologists. A huge diversity of forests, a huge diversity of people, and many things to study. So I'm very sorry that it's not been possible for us to come back since January of this year, which was our last visit. I should perhaps explain that I've not spent much of my life in academia. I've mainly worked for conservation organizations. So I've been very involved in research, but my research has always had the very clear objective of contributing to achieving conservation of biodiversity and forest ecosystems. And I still believe very strongly that that should be the objective of most of our research. And I think that there's a little bit of a problem that a lot of research is not now very oriented towards practical outcomes. So there are lots of reasons for this, but in universities like our own, people have very powerful incentives to publish in a few top journals. And that means publishing generalizable global research rather than local research. And all these sort of incentives for academics, and I think it's the same in Indonesia, are to do things which get academic recognition rather than practical outcomes on the ground. And I think that's a pity, because I think that we are seeing a very rapid decline of biological diversity and of forest ecosystems throughout the world, and that this is an urgent problem and that all of our research should be mobilized to try and address that problem. Now, this is a particular issue in your part of the world. I've been involved in a number of studies of Wallacea with the Institute, the Indonesian Academy of Sciences, and other people. So Wallacea has extraordinarily high biodiversity, and the biodiversity is very threatened. So maybe on a global scale, Wallacea is one of the most important areas for forest conservation that there is anywhere. And it's not receiving very much attention. There's far more investment going into research and education and teaching in Western Indonesia, in Sumatra, Java, Kalimantan, than there is in Eastern Indonesia, in Maluku and Papua. So when I was freed of my responsibilities with C4 and with IUCN, I decided that my contribution for the rest of my career would be to try and achieve conservation outcomes in Eastern Indonesia, in the islands that I really had not visited as much as I would have liked to have done at that time. So we got some funding from the MacArthur Foundation, and we started coming to various islands in Eastern Indonesia after about 2012. And I think we started coming to Ambon in 2014 or 15, and we've been back many times since, and we've brought lots of students, and we've had lots of researchers that are associated with us working on conservation and development problems, mainly in Seram and Pulau Buanu. And that's been very rewarding, and we definitely intend to intensify that work. And one of the reasons that Dean John Innes brought us to UBC was because he also saw the need for UBC to contribute more to natural resources research in Indonesia. So our faculty is the biggest international forestry faculty in the world. And our university has many other people very concerned with sustainability, with biodiversity and things. So I think our university has a lot to offer in Indonesia. And we're present in many parts of the tropics, but nowhere near as much as we would like to be in Indonesia. So there is a deliberate strategy, a desire by University of British Columbia to be more present in Indonesia, but to be present in a way that contributes to building capacity of researchers and managers of natural resources in Indonesia, that conducts research that's relevant to solving conservation problems, and that provides a two-way partnership so that scientists from UBC can collaborate with scientists from Indonesia and vice versa. So we are particularly keen on Pattimura University because it's very central to Wallacea, to Eastern Indonesia, and you are probably the leading university dealing with the things that we are concerned with in Eastern Indonesia. So it's been very fortunate that we've had such a good reception, that we've been able to develop very good collaboration already with people from Pattimura University, and you have accessible from Pattimura some of the world's most interesting tropical forests and most biodiverse tropical forests, which are amazing places to work. So what we would like to do from UBC is to intensify that collaboration. So had it not been for COVID, we would have been back probably already twice this year to spend time with you in the field. And we have a number of doctoral students, postdocs, who would be working in Eastern Indonesia, mainly in Seram. We've chosen to focus on Seram for the time being. That's not been possible. As soon as it does become possible, then we will be on the plane and coming back to see you. And we're really hoping that that will be possible soon, but it doesn't look as though it's going to be immediate. It may be towards the end of the year if we're optimistic. But when that becomes possible, we will certainly be returning. I think what I'd like to do now is just show you a few slides, and I can share my screen and just talk through a few slides that illustrate some of the things that we're interested in. So one of the concerns that I have is that there's a gap between research and practice, a gap between researchers in Indonesia and international researchers dealing with sustainable forest management, forest ecology. And I think that there are misunderstandings. I think the fact that a lot of high-powered research goes on in places like British Columbia, but also other leading universities, by people who are not really based in tropical countries or don't spend enough time in tropical countries and don't spend enough time in the field talking to people in tropical countries, means that they can get things wrong, that they can make simple assumptions about land use change and the causes of land use change, and they can get those things wrong in an unhelpful way. I think a couple of examples that I'd like to give are that pretty much all the academics in universities in the West would claim that oil palm is a very bad thing for conservation. But of course, that depends on the context. There are places where it's far more important to find jobs for people, get people fed, give them education and healthcare, and oil palm plantation expansion can help to achieve that. And there are examples in Western Indonesia where that has happened. So oil palm, when it's done badly, can be very bad for forest conservation. When it's done well, it can help to solve the problems of forest conservation. A second example is that there are major efforts by international academics to lobby against the construction of roads and infrastructure in tropical forest countries. And your president, Jokowi, his main thing is the construction of infrastructure and roads. And people think that is bad for conservation, but of course it need not be. Most people who are trying to manage forests, they want infrastructure because they want to be able to get around and supervise their forests. They also want to see the people living in and around those forests becoming more prosperous. And the construction of infrastructure is the first thing, the main thing that will enable people to achieve prosperity. And I think one of our fundamental beliefs in my little research team is that you really cannot ignore the need to make poor people more prosperous. They're not going to be interested in long-term conservation if they are suffering extreme poverty. For them, basic human needs will come before long-term conservation. So you have to meet those basic human needs. So I've been involved in this issue, these issues for a long time. And I've written quite a lot about how you can integrate conservation with development, how you can reconcile conservation with development, and how you can do this at the scale of landscapes. And so if you want to know more about what I think about this, there are a couple of books here, which I think I've left with Argos. You can find them. They're a bit out of date now. I need to find some time to write them again, but they set out my basic beliefs in how science can be applied to the achievement of conservation. So one of the examples I gave you was that this business of whether oil palm is bad for conservation or good for conservation. We summarized our understanding of this in a paper that we published a few years ago that's been quite widely received. We produced simulation models of what would happen when you converted 2%, 4% or 6% of a landscape in Kalimantan from natural forest into oil palm. And we factored in the positive impacts that would have on the livelihoods of people. And our conclusion was a certain amount of a very positive thing for conservation. It would take people out of the forest, it would give them good jobs, salaries, it would give them infrastructure, and they would be less likely to practice very extensive shifting agriculture. That's just one example of the way research can build the case for making the correct decisions on the ground in landscapes about what sort of development patterns are required. So we said that we decided a few years ago to focus our attention mostly on Indonesia. We still have a little bit of activity in Africa. And we decided to do this by taking a relatively small number of places and forming links with local universities, working with those universities, building partnerships, and returning as often as possible and bringing students, and also receiving students from those places. So these are some of the places that we've been doing that in, and you'll see that Seram Ambon is right in the middle. We also have an interest in West Papua. We've been somewhat involved in North Sulawesi. We have some activities in Nusa Tenggara Barat, and we've been in Riau and parts of Central and West Kalimantan. So in all of those places, we now have been active for quite a few years, and we know a lot of people, and we have a lot of data, and I think we have quite a lot of understanding of the issues. So to give you an example, the site in North Kalimantan, or in Malinaw, we started working there in the mid-90s, 1990s. I think 50 or 60 papers have now been published in international journals based on the work that we and our team have done in that area. And I think that has led to much more thoughtful decisions about land use change and development activities in North Kalimantan. The forests there are still in pretty good condition. So our ambition for areas where we might work with Pattimura University would be similar. We would like to do research, train students, interact with local people and local decision makers, and try and use science to have a positive influence on conservation of the forests in your region. So this idea of sentinel landscapes is that we have places that have high levels of poverty, high levels of biodiversity, important forest values, and where there are local partners who are interested in collaborating with us, in this case, Pattimura. So this photograph is in Sawai, in Seram. Now, the problems that you face in these places cannot be solved by single scientists from single disciplines. You need to mobilize people from lots of different disciplines and lots of different approaches. So just as an example, in Sawai, in Manusela National Park, you need both ecology and biology. You need forestry and agronomy to cover the whole landscape. And in deference to the rector, we need to know law. We need to study legal arrangements, especially traditional legal arrangements, and modern and traditional governance arrangements. So those sorts of things are really important in understanding how things are going to change and how you can get change to happen in a better way. And of course, Ibu Intu and the anthropologists, so we ensure that we really understand the local people. And we have our friend Lauren, who's in Hawaii right now, but who will be joining you early next year, who's an ethnobiologist. And I think ethnobotany and understanding people's use of forests and landscapes is really important, and we hope to contribute there. But the key thing is you need people with lots of different specializations, but you need to get them to work together in teams, and you need to get them to interact with local people, to live in the villages, and to interact with local decision makers, and to do this with academics and students from the universities that host us, in this case, Pattimura University. But in response to some of those questions, we are very open to having collaboration with other universities in other parts of Eastern Indonesia, and I think I saw Kalimantan on the screen as well. We clearly are very keen to work there. I also had, obviously, remote sensing and GIS. So just one little example of a place that I find fascinating. It's a sort of microcosm of all the problems that we're facing, and it's an example of a place where research can, I hope, contribute to finding solutions. This is Pulau Buano, and that's me going ashore in Pulau Buano with some of our colleagues in the background there. I can't recognize them, but some of the people on this call are probably in that photograph. So Pulau Buano is a tiny island where the people are extremely poor. and it has very high biodiversity values. It's the only place in the world where this kahichat, this guano monarch, is found, but there are lots of other birds there, and there are marine resources that are very valuable, and plant species that are very scarce. So it's a high conservation priority, but it's also a place where people have needs that have to be met. So we had a team there of people from a lot of different universities, from Indonesia, Europe, Australia, and here, about a year or two ago, who did a study of the kahichat and where it was living, but also spent a lot of time with the people. And we're still continuing that work. Emilio, the second from the right there, would be back in the area now, but he can't go. And he's going to work with the people to look for sustainable solutions to the problems that they're facing in developing their local industry, which is the production of kayu putih oil from Melaleuca stands. So the problem is that a lot of the forest has been converted to Melaleuca stands, but a bigger problem is that to distill the Melaleuca, people use fuel wood. So they are degrading the natural forest by over-harvesting fuel wood and destroying the habitat of all those endemic and rare birds and so forth. So solving this problem requires research on lots of things, on the ecology of the birds, on the businesses of the people, the industry of the people, how their enterprises function, but also on the laws and governance arrangements that apply to that area. So again, the legal and institutional questions need to be answered. So this is the sort of facility where the kayu putih oil is produced, and this is where our students, Adinda Rizki and Emilio Valeri, have spent quite a bit of time collecting data with the local people. We haven't found solutions, but we think there are some avenues to explore which might produce solutions which would make the local people prosper more and help to conserve biodiversity. Now, this is back on the main island of Seram. I think this is Manusela National Park and Sawai, which is another extremely interesting area. You have one of Indonesia's most important protected areas, the national park, Manusela, and you have populations of people living on the coast and in the interior of various ethnic groups. The ones in the interior living in fairly poor conditions. And you have lots of things happening that may eventually cause change to occur in this landscape. And this landscape is remarkably rich in biodiversity. There are just an awful lot of rare terrestrial and aquatic animals and birds in this area. So it's a global priority for biodiversity conservation. Sorry. So this is an area that I think would qualify very well as a sentinel landscape. There are simple facilities there. It's fairly accessible from Ambon, and it's the sort of place that anybody who's interested in forest ecology, forest wildlife, particularly our dean, John Innes, would very much spend some time. And there are lots of other people who would like to visit this area. It's fascinating, and there are innumerable research opportunities, needs. We don't know anywhere near enough about the ecology of the forest or the ecology of the biodiversity, but we also don't know nearly enough about the activities of the people, the views of the people, the understandings they have, and the knowledge they have. We need to get into that knowledge. So we have Lauren, Ibu Lauren, who's going to be studying the ethnobotany of this area, starting fairly soon as she's allowed to come back because of COVID. And we would like to have other people studying the institutional arrangements in these villages and the way they relate to the government in Ambon and the...
Excuse me, Pak Jeff, you have 2 minutes left.
Right,
Sorry.
I'm going to finish then. Thank you. So just to switch very quickly to Riau province. This is one of the world's biggest pulp and paper mills, and I give it here because we've been somewhat involved in how it's impacting on people and the environment. So most conservationists, again, see these sorts of developments as very bad for the environment. But I would like to argue that the jobs that are created, the wealth that is generated by these sorts of industrial investments are necessary for a country like Indonesia with 270 million people. They drive the economy. And if it's done right, these sorts of things can have major conservation benefits. So in this area, we are applying a landscape approach. So we have plantations of acacia that you see there in the center of the picture, and we have natural forests interspersed with them. And the company has agreed to conserve 1 hectare of forest for every hectare that it plants. So in this area, we have a very nice balance between providing jobs and employment and healthcare and education and infrastructure for local people, and producing a very profitable crop. So these are people living on the edge of the area in the protected part of the landscape. And this is a very nice example of how you can reconcile even large-scale development with meeting the needs of local people and conserving natural forest values. And we've written this up, and again, you'll see that the paper deals with governance. So again, it's the legal and institutional dimensions of the problems that we've been focusing on. So we take landscape approaches. I think many of you probably know this paper, which sets out our approach to dealing with landscapes. So I won't go through it since you already tells me I'm running out of time. But I think there's a lot of potential for setting up an arrangement that makes it easy for faculty and researchers from UBC to come and work with you, but also for people from Pattimura and other universities in the region to come and work with us in British Columbia. So my ambition would be to see lots of doctoral students, lots of master's students, maybe some undergraduates, and a lot of scientific papers being produced, but also a lot of practical conservation achievements happening in your area. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Jeff Sayer. We're gonna move to the next presentation by Ibu Intu. We're gonna present a talk about local governance and sustainable landscapes in Indonesia. Tapi sebelum itu saya ingin mengatakan mungkin untuk for ladies and gentlemen that you have put all your questions regarding the collaboration tentang kerjasama in answering in question and answering section at the end. We're gonna talk about it. So don't worry, I'm not skip your question. Okay, I'm gonna introduce Ibu Intu. Dr. Agni, usually we call him Ibu Intu, has a multidisciplinary background, anthropology, cinematography, and fine arts. Her work has focused on livelihoods and cultural diversity of indigenous people and their natural resource management practices. She worked in remote locations in numerous countries in the tropical region in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Her research focus is on forest-dependent people and coastal communities. She gives attention to the balance between conservation and social, cultural, and economic development. Ibu Intu has worked with multidisciplinary teams in remote locations in tropical landscapes and seascapes in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. She has focused on issues with indigenous people and local communities, particularly on the importance of the traditional knowledge and wise practices in natural resources management and conservation of their cultural diversity. Her goal is to have an influence on global efforts to support indigenous people and local communities to improve their livelihoods whilst retaining their identity, cultural diversity, traditional knowledge, environment, and natural access. Ibu Intu, you have 20 minutes for presentation. Time is yours.
Okay, so can everyone see my slide? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you everyone. So I will continue a little bit since that Pak Jeff already talked a little bit about Indonesia. I will probably talk in mixed language. I hope everybody can understand what we have been discussing about, but we're talking about, but I can also add a little bit in Indonesian. So as Pak Jeff had said before, we have some different sites that we work in Indonesia with our local partners, including with UNPATTI, but we also work with UNIPA in Papua, in Manokwari, and we also work with people in Samratulangi and also in Unhas for the last few years normally. So I'm actually wanting to focus a little bit more on small islands because again, in Eastern Indonesia, we have a lot of the islands that are smaller than Kalimantan, Sumatra, and Sulawesi. And also the interesting thing is that we need to take a different approach, which is ridge to reef and thinking about the link between forest and the sea, right? Or all the terrestrial and the marine side of things. So this is a photo in, again, in Maluku, in Buano Island, when we were there. So I don't know if I can advance my slide. Oops. Okay, so I just want to focus about, because a lot of people has been working and doing a lot of different conferences and meetings and everything with a lot of different decision makers. And I would like to be able to take the idea that we could do more things on the ground instead of having meetings all the time at a higher level. But I do think it's important to be able to do more things on the ground so that there's the reality on the ground is taken into consideration to do policies and regulations and the law that are needed. I think we need more practical works on the ground and also collecting data that it is based on evidence whenever we take any decision. And I think it is important to do action research. So that's why we see the importance of working with NGOs, with local communities, with the local PEMDAs or BAPEDAs in the different places where we work. So the idea of coming to a landscape is actually also part of the capacity building. And we try to have mentorship as well. So whenever we go to these different places, we always ask if there's any professors or students who are interested in joining us to do a lot of the work together. So one of the paper that came out from our group, the last one is about conservation science and practice must engage with realities of complex tropical landscapes, because as we know, the tropical landscape is changing and it's very dynamic, and we do need to take into account all these changes whenever we want to take any decision. So in this concept of sentinel landscapes, we've been talking about it, I think, with several of our colleagues at UNPATTI, that it could be, how do you call it, a laboratory, actually, isn't it, in our own backyard, we could say, because UNPATTI is located in really, really interesting and rich biodiversity, and also all those areas are very rich in culture and a lot of different ethnic groups and so on. So it could be a really good way of having all the students, master's or doctoral level, to learn more from the laboratory, you could say, in those different sites. So it could be in Seram, it could be in Saparua, it could be in Buano, etc., etc. And the idea is to be able to get long-term data sets, because then after that, then other people can work based on those data that has been collected for several years, right? So the idea of working with local NGOs, with local government, and even including communities, as citizen science is nowadays getting very important, and people are talking a lot about it. How do you actually engage communities to be involved in planning natural resources management, planning to make good policies, and so on. So we try to be able to get all this engagement, so not just with local universities, local government, and civil society, but also with private sector, because in all this area, we know that there are a lot of companies that are coming, and development program is actually going to these different areas. And in our team, as Pak Jeff already said, we have a lot of people with different background, and we didn't have enough. So that's why we try to get more people more interested to come with us to Indonesia, especially from UBC. And also we would like to have impact so that it could improve decisions, policy, and behavior of people, isn't it? So basically the landscape needs to be understood by everybody, and it could be, then we could take better decision in the future. So as Jeff said, we have several landscapes that we go quite regularly, every few months, we could say. And normally we go to Indonesia several times of the year. And so again, Indonesia, it's very rich in culture. We have more than how many, 700 different languages. So people are all dependent on the natural resources, including in the forest, the minerals, the agriculture, and the marine resources. And we have a lot of serious environmental challenges. And there's climate change as well. And then there's the growing number of population. The demography is rising all the time. And again, the climate change it's quite a serious thing, and will be even more serious if you are living in small islands, right? So because of the sea level rise and changing of temperature, etc., etc. So the small island cases, actually it's going to be even be more vulnerable to all these natural disasters. And in Indonesia, we've been getting a lot of these earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, etc., etc. So we are quite prosperous. Indonesia is actually it's a very rich country in natural resources and biodiversity, but there are still some poverty in some of the remotest area of Indonesia. So the one thing that I'm always very interested in is how can we look at biodiversity conservation when people are still poor. So can community forests be compatible with biodiversity conservation? Because I think in the last few years, Pak Jokowi has been giving back a lot more forests to local communities. And then there's a lot of program on social forestry, etc., etc. So I am interested in looking at how can you make it work actually between conservation and development trade-offs. And one other things, we have ex-students who are now professors in Sulawesi, who are teaching in universities in Sulawesi. And we are working with also with the Bapedas and the Pemdas in Indonesia. And these people came to Australia. At that time, we were in Australia with our same program like at UBC, and we were looking at different issues in climate change adaptations and the resilience of communities in these small islands. So that's why I'm showing this paper, is because we have been interested in small islands because it is a very interesting way of looking at the ecosystem because of the link between the terrestrial and the marine and coastal region, especially in Indonesia. Yeah. And I think it's also the important thing is that in Maluku, we're very famous for Spice Islands. So we have a few students now, Adinda and Emilia, who's also interested in looking at all these value chain, value networks, and all these things linked to cloves, kayu putih, nutmegs, and all the different spices that are people looking for from Europe and everywhere else around the world. One of the other things that I think is very important as well is we haven't talked about it, but it's the impact of mining in Indonesia. And I think in Seram, there's also a lot of tambang rakyat, small scale miners that are quite important, that has a lot of important impacts on the environment. So of our team members, James, who has been coming with us for several years to Indonesia, been looking at the benefits of small and large scale mine in North Sulawesi, but we're also looking at all the same kind of things in Kalimantan. And I think it would be an important thing also to do the same in Seram, because I think in SBB, in Seram bagian Barat, there's also a lot of mining activities going on. And in the future, there will be a lot more in Eastern Indonesia, I think. And like, for example, looking at actors network analysis and things like that, that would be a really good way of understanding the importance of different stakeholders in a landscape or in a seascape. I'm just going to show you a little bit of activities that we have done so far in Seram and Maluku. with our colleagues from UNPATTI and also some local NGOs. Again, as Pak Jeff has said, Wallacea is a very high biodiversity region, and a lot of people from everywhere around the world are very interested in even like bird watching, like ecotourism could be a really important added value to the area. But how can you make it work? Because all this area, I think I'm gonna show a little bit of what we have done so far with the local communities, and especially the birdwing butterfly had attracted whales actually, isn't it, into the area. So that's one of the most important attractive thing that probably like Pak John Ines would be saying that it would be a good way of getting people to come to Maluku. So again, oops, there's a problem here, but on my side. So I'm very interested in looking at all these poverty and conservation. How do you say? It doesn't move. Okay. So there are a lot of things coming and development program coming to Seram. And as we know, there's going to be oil and gas in East Seram. There's going to be oil palm. I think they are already there, and it's growing numbers in Seram. And there's already oil palm in North Seram that we've seen there before. And then the sugar in West Seram. There's cacao with olam in Northeast Seram. And there's going to be also a new agricultural concession. And then there's the social forestry that I've been talking about. And people do need to eat, right? So all this biodiversity that we've been talking about is very rich, but it's also a source of food for people in the area. So, and the development program continues. So one other thing that I'm interested as well is to understand all the different richness of traditional knowledge of the Adat communities, because all this richness could be helping in probably making the local regulations and also making better management in the future of the area. So we have been trying to get more colleagues from Indonesia, from other parts of Indonesia, to be interested in working with us as well. So here we have some students from UNPATTI, but we also have Ibu Lauren on the right, who is from University of Hawaii. And she will be working with Pak Max and Pak Agus in UNPATTI on ethnobotany. And we have also Pak Ali, who is in the red shirt, who is from LIPI, from Jakarta. He's very interested as well in the Adat communities, and how can we enrich different regulations and things links to traditional ecological knowledge and also all their different culture. So Pak Dokshil in the middle is from the university in Norway. So there are a lot of interest actually to build sort of a platform to be able to share and learn together from the different sites that we try to build to work in together. So last time we were there, we had quite a lot of people from the different institutions in Ambon, in Maluku. There's Pak Agus and several other colleagues from different institutions from Bogor, like C4, there's LIPI, and then there's other universities from different parts of the world, from Australia, from Norway, who came and trying to work together on what kind of agenda in the future, or what kind of research that we could do together, so that we could have a long-term collaboration in Maluku or in Eastern Indonesia as well. So in some of the activities that we do, we bring students to Maluku, and the hope is that in the future we will have students from Maluku as well, yeah, coming to UBC. So maybe we were talking about the different type of scholarship that we could try to get from Canadian government, but I think there's also possibilities with LPDP. So I hope that in the future that we could try to look into the different possibilities of getting scholarship from the Indonesian government as well, to have this mentoring and leadership, and also how do you say, a capacity building for the region. So we try to engage with different level of institutions. So we also try to visit the different local offices, like the Bupati office, and then the different Pemda's office. And then we also try to bring people from the Pemda to the field with us. So we also have seminars while we were in Ambon. So I hope that there will be more of this going on in the future when we will be able to travel again to Maluku. So one other thing is that we try to be able to publish papers together. Again, we would like to have more impact. So the papers that we would like to write in the future as well is we try to be able to involve not just academics, but if there are people from NGOs, LSM, or from government who would be interested in doing that, we would be really, really happy to be able to do that, because I think it's important to be able to have the things written up so that it will be people can use and read it as well and get more knowledge about the area. So we have also tried and worked with the Taman Nasional Manusela and with the local communities. We try to help them as well with their little projects like for ecotourism, and we try to be able to have students going there and then staying in the different villages for several weeks so that they can help even for people who wants to learn English, for example, if they want to do their ecotourism program. So at least when there are tourists or bird watcher coming to the area, they have the minimum English so that they can connect with the visitors. So we have our students that we take with us. Usually they stay about 2 months in Indonesia, and they usually come to the local universities and they come and work with the local NGOs. And the hope is that we will be able to continue doing this, and then there will be local students from UNPATTI who will be able to join us as well when we go to the villages. So here in the forest, we also have students from UNPATTI and also the local NGO colleagues. And some of the students will just stay in the village and they will live with the communities. And again, in some of the forests that Pak Jeff also shown, is Emilio and Adinda are Indonesians, but they're now doing their PhD in UBC. And so we hope that we will have more students coming from Eastern Indonesia to UBC in the future, so we can do a lot of action research together, basically, yeah. So these are some of the places that we go with, in Sawai as well, with the local communities. And this is the last paper that just came out on Seram Island, and we're hoping that we will be able to publish some other papers in the future if we are be able to build more people interested in working with us over there. So basically what we're interested in is it's about improving governance, right? So we think that we need to have healthy economies and then the functioning legal systems. And of course, all these land rights and the access are secure, because there are so many different ways of looking at land tenure, isn't it? In Indonesia, as we know, there's hak guna, hak pakai, and then a lot of different hak. And so it's very important to understand all these different.
Excuse me, we have 1 minute left.
Okay, yeah, I'm finishing up. So basically, we would like to be able to have the civil society empowered. We would like to have the communities working together with us and understanding what is really the changes in the landscape. And I think that's the end of my presentation. And if anybody would like to ask any questions in Indonesian, I would be happy to answer as well. But otherwise, yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ibu Intu, for the nice presentation. So we're gonna move to the fourth presentation. It's gonna be presented by Professor Dr. Agus Castanya and Professor Dr. Gun Mardiat Moko. They're gonna present the talk about conservation of biodiversity and human livelihood in small islands. But let me introduce both of them. Professor Dr. Insinyur Agus Castanya got his bachelor degree at Faculty of Forestry, Patimura University, and in 1987 he got his doctorate degree at Faculty of Forestry, University of Gajah Mada, Jogja. As a professional in the field of forestry, actively involved in several workshops as a speaker, actively conducting research and writing journals and articles, also actively conducting community surveys. Professor Dr. Insinyur Gun of the Forest Management Program at the postgraduate program at Patimura University. He's an expert in the field of forestry. He's actively conducting several research projects and seminars or workshops as an expert keynote speaker for community dedication. Agus and Pagun have 20 minutes to present their talk. Time is yours.
Thank you, Ibu Audrey and everyone. I'm still prepare the presentation in English, but I think I speak Indonesia is more clear. Sorry, and for Pak Jeff and Pak John, and maybe other people from abroad. Oke, terima kasih. Saya dan Pak Gun membawa topik tentang konservasi biodiversity dan human livelihood di small island. Saya kira banyak hal yang sudah dijelaskan oleh Pak Jeff dan Pak Ibu Intu. Dan saya coba membawa ini sebagai juga sebuah kerangka di dalam membangun kolaborasi baik itu dengan UBC, Ibu Intu dan Pak Jeff, tetapi juga dengan partner yang lain. Saat ini kita juga bekerja sama dengan Forest Watch Indonesia dan beberapa lembaga yang lain dalam rangka memang menjaga kelestarian dari biodiversitas di pulau-pulau kecil, terutama di Maluku maupun Maluku Utara. Next. Ya, jadi next, Ibu. Jadi Bapak Ibu sekalian, beberapa fokus yang menjadi percakapan kita di saat ini adalah misalnya introduction, global warming and climate change, small island characteristic and climate change threat, impact of COVID pandemic, biodiversity in Maluku, dan conservation of biodiversity and human livelihood. Next. Ya, jadi Bapak Ibu sekalian, saya kira konservasi biodiversity dan livelihood ini sangat penting kita lihat karena kerusakan atau kehancuran dari biodiversitas kita itu sangat berbahaya bagi kehidupan manusia dan lingkungan, dan saat ini hampir terjadi kerusakan yang sangat luar biasa. Dan memang hampir di seluruh dunia, tetapi di Indonesia memang ekonomi eksploitatif ini yang telah membuat penurunan dari seluruh biodiversitas kita yang sangat kaya itu. Dan saya kira dampak-dampak yang sudah kita lihat sampai dengan saat ini adalah kerusakan hutan, juga kerusakan biodiversitas di hutan, di darat, maupun di laut, terutama karena ini pulau-pulau kecil. Dan saat ini dampak yang sangat besar yang tidak bisa kita kendalikan, hampir-hampir tidak bisa dikendalikan, adalah COVID. Yang memang itu sebagai akibat dari sebuah kerusakan yang sangat besar, yang akibat dari terjadinya kerusakan ekosistem maupun biodiversitas yang dari keseimbangan ekosistem dan alam ini membuat timbulnya berbagai penyakit, dan itulah yang kita rasakan di saat ini.
Nah, karena itu saya kira biodiversitas kita ini yang harus kita betul-betul menjaganya, dan karena itu kita harus melakukan pembaharuan di dalam seluruh proses. Dampak-dampak yang sangat besar, kerusakan hutan, kemiskinan, tetapi ancaman-ancaman penyakit-penyakit baru itu kemungkinan itu lebih besar kalau kita tetap mempunyai pola-pola pembangunan yang kita lakukan sampai dengan saat ini. Karena itu kita harus melakukan perubahan paradigma secara mendasar, dan kita berharap bahwa dari kolaborasi-kolaborasi yang dibangun dan melalui kolaborasi dengan semua stakeholder, terutama pemerintah daerah, kita bisa melakukan pembaharuan secara mendasar. Next. Nah, Bapak Ibu sekalian, saya kira di dunia ini dengan Paris Agreement itu kena seluruh dunia. Karena itu melalui kajian-kajian yang dilakukan juga di Maluku bersama-sama dengan APIK beberapa tahun belakangan ini, itu telah terjadi kenaikan temperatur antara 0 sampai dengan 0,5 sampai 1,5%, 5 derajat Celcius. Dan dampaknya sangat besar terhadap pulau-pulau kecil. Kenaikan tinggi muka, kenaikan ombak gelombang laut itu rata-rata dari tahun ke tahun itu 1 sampai 2 meter lebih tinggi dari tahun-tahun sebelum karena gejolak alam. Kenaikan temperatur, kenaikan muka laut, dan yang sangat hebat itu adalah bagaimana dampak-dampak ini terhadap seluruh kehidupan masyarakat, baik di darat maupun di laut. Mungkin selanjutnya kita lihat dampak yang coba diperoleh, next, Bu. Coba diperoleh dari hasil kajian dengan APIK, sebetulnya kita lihat bahwa ada bidang-bidang yang sangat terdampak, seperti yang tertera di dalam slide ini, yaitu misalnya kerusakan atau ancaman bencana, kemudian bidang perikanan, tourism, air bersih, pertanian, pertambangan, forestry, dan lain-lain. Dan itu yang sudah terjadi dari tahun ke tahun di Maluku, di pulau-pulau kecil. Nah, itu di dalam itu terjadi berbagai ancaman terhadap kehidupan masyarakat. Next. Nah, Bapak Ibu, kalau kita lihat dengan berbagai pengaruh yang begitu luar biasa dan karakteristik pulau-pulau kita, di mana di situ dilihat bahwa ada di Indonesia misalnya di Maluku dan Maluku Utara itu adalah ekoregion yang ada di dalam kepulauan kita adalah misalnya di Maluku itu ada 1.340 pulau, dan di dalam rencana tata ruang kita itu ada 12 gugus pulau, sedangkan di Maluku Utara itu ada 8 wilayah pengembangan sama dengan gugus pulau. Kurang lebih ada 600 sampai 700 pulau di utara. Nah, karakteristik yang paling spesifik adalah Maluku mempunyai daerah aliran sungai yang sangat pendek dan sempit. Nah, sehingga ini memang sangat berbahaya bagi ketersediaan air tanah atau air bersih. Dan semua kerusakan di darat itu mempunyai dampak yang sangat besar pada kehidupan di laut. Nah, karena itu, Bapak Ibu, dengan pembangunan yang berlangsung selama ini dengan adanya perubahan iklim, dan mempunyai dampak-dampak yang luar biasa itu akan merusak seluruh sumber daya kita, dan dampak-dampak tadi seperti penyakit dan sebagainya bukan saja pada manusia, tetapi juga pada biodiversitas yang lain. Next. Nah, Bapak Ibu, saya kira saya mengupdate saja data COVID di Indonesia ya kita sudah tahu, tetapi di Maluku saat ini pada tanggal 24 itu cukup mengalami kenaikan, sehingga hampir di seluruh wilayah juga ya sudah menerima dampak ini, dan hampir-hampir ini tidak bisa dikendalikan, kemudian tidak bisa diprediksi kapan kita bisa mengatasi COVID ini. Nah, ini akibat daripada kerusakan lingkungan dan juga akibat dari perubahan iklim yang saat ini kalau timbul berbagai hal itu pada masa-masa lalu di lokal negara atau daerah-daerah tertentu, tapi COVID ini sudah terdistribusi hampir di seluruh dunia. Next. Ya, jadi Bapak Ibu sekalian, sebenarnya kita adalah negara yang sangat besar memiliki biodiversitas ya, yang kedua di dunia, dan biodiversitas kita itu baik di hutan, di darat maupun di laut yang juga belum teridentifikasi dengan baik. Kemudian kita punya ekosistem khusus seperti ekosistem sagu. Di dalam wilayahnya terdapat biodiversitas yang spesifik. Biodiversitas mangrove misalnya, ekosistem mangrove itu juga komunitas yang sangat kaya, yang juga sebagai barrier dan mempunyai potensi karbon yang cukup tinggi dalam pengendalian perubahan iklim. Yang kedua, yang berikut, yang keempat itu kita sebenarnya merupakan wilayah walase atau walase ekosistem yang mempunyai potensi spesifik, terutama biodiversitas yang endemis. Artinya dia ada hanya di Maluku atau di pulau tertentu yang kalau kita tidak melakukan konservasi dengan baik, maka kemungkinan biodiversitas atau keragaman hayati itu bisa punah atau bisa hilang. Kemudian ini ada penelitian dari Pak Gun dan teman-teman tentang semut dan burung di beberapa pulau kecil, dan itu yang nanti akan dibawakan oleh Pak Gun sebagai sebuah penelitian di lapangan. Terus, ya Bapak Ibu sekalian, ini adalah wilayah walase di Indonesia, yaitu di Sulawesi, Maluku, dan Kepulauan Sunda. Itu 3 wilayah biodiversitas yang sesungguhnya sangat kaya, dan kalau kita mengikuti proses-proses pembangunan yang ada sekarang, itu hampir tidak terdeteksi atau tidak diintegrasikan di dalam pembangunan, terutama di dalam RPJM ataupun konsep-konsep pembangunan yang ada di Maluku maupun Maluku Utara. Nah, ini yang mesti beberapa kali pertemuan-pertemuan dengan stakeholder itu sudah terus kami ingatkan supaya ini betul-betul bisa kita integrasikan di dalam berbagai konsep pembangunan dan dijaga kelestariannya. Terus, ya Bapak Ibu, ini hotspot atau keragaman-keragaman hayati yang telah dideteksi di dalam wilayah-wilayah walase, dan di Maluku misalnya itu ada sekitar 50, di Maluku Utara juga sekitar 50 hotspot yang ada di darat dan di laut. Nah, ini kalau kita coba memeriksanya di dalam dokumen-dokumen perencanaan kita itu sama sekali tidak terintegrasi. Nah, sehingga kalau kita lihat dengan deforestasi yang begitu besar, maka sebenarnya hotspot ini kalau dia katakanlah berada di areal penggunaan lain, maka itu sudah mengalami kehancuran yang cukup besar. Kemungkinan yang masih bisa terjamin mungkin kalau dia ada di hutan lindung ataukah di hutan konservasi. Hutan produksi pun menjadi terdegradasi cukup besar. Nah, karena itu Bapak Ibu, saya kira dengan perubahan iklim dan dampak-dampak COVID ini, mari kita kembali melihat dokumen-dokumen atau dasar-dasar pembangunan kita untuk kita menata kembali. Selanjutnya, ini yang harus disampaikan ya oleh Pak Gun, ini hasil penelitian. Pak Gun, Ibu Sinta mungkin dengan teman-teman. Silakan Pak Gun.
Baik, terima kasih Pak Agus. Bapak Ibu sekalian, penelitian kami itu menyangkut burung dan semut di pulau-pulau kecil yang sebagai bioindikator adanya perubahan iklim. Jadi seperti yang dikatakan Pak Agus tadi bahwa untuk memulai konservasi itu paling tidak kita harus mengetahui bioindikatornya apa dulu, kemudian kita mengambil sampel di Pulau Ambon dan pulau-pulau Lease. Seperti kita ketahui, Pulau Ambon itu 775 km persegi, hampir separuhnya itu wilayah kota. Kemudian Haruku hanya 178 km persegi, Saparua hampir separuh dari Pulau Ambon, 247 km persegi. Sementara Nusa Laut itu hanya 12 km persegi, tetapi penduduknya sangat banyak, yaitu 5.500 jiwa kurang lebih. Nah, jadi kita menggunakan untuk awal ini mendukung konsep Pak Agus untuk konsep bahwa perlu adanya konservasi untuk terutama untuk jenis-jenis endemik. Nah, karena semut dan burung itu menjadi sangat peka terhadap perubahan iklim, maka kalau kita bisa mempelajari ke dua jenis tadi, burung dan semut di pulau-pulau Ambon dan Pulau Lease, hanya contoh dulu, nanti akan dikembangkan ke pulau lain, karena kita beri sebutkan tadi Pak Agus bilang jumlah luas pulau di Maluku lebih dari 1.300-an ya. Ini kita akan lihat bagaimana dengan adanya burung kan bisa bermigrasi kemana-mana, tapi paling tidak kita akan melihat bagaimana kondisi yang ada di Ambon, Haruku, Nusa Laut, dan Saparua. Ya, berikutnya, slide berikutnya. Jadi kita akan lihat bahwa kalau ada jenis burung dulu, kita akan lihat bahwa di Ambon, Haruku, Saparua, Nusa Laut, ini jenis-jenis burung ini ada 8 yang ada semua di 4 pulau. Jadi untuk melihat sebarannya, 8 jenis ini diketemukan di semua pulau. Tetapi di Ambon sendiri itu hanya 8, ada 8 ya. Ada alap-alap sapi dan seterusnya. Kemudian Haruku ada 3 yang tidak diketemukan di jenis lain. Kemudian Saparua hanya 2. Nah, sementara justru di Nusa Laut yang meskipun pulaunya kecil hanya 12 km persegi, tapi terdapat 6 spesies atau 6 jenis burung yang tidak diketemukan di 3 pulau yang lain. Nah, ini memberikan contoh bahwa kita akan lihat kalau nanti secara time series kita punya data ini, lalu terjadi perubahan komposisi, itu menandakan bahwa ada sesuatu yang berubah mulai dari landscape-nya, landscape dan seascape-nya ya. Baik, slide berikutnya. Nah, ini beberapa yang tadi disebutkan, ini yang bedet kelapa paruh ini hanya ditemukan di Haruku, di Pulau Haruku. Kemudian ada juga contoh ini alap-alap sapi, itu hanya diketemukan di Ambon. Kemudian yang ditemukan di Nusa Laut itu layang-layang batu, ini di pulau lain tidak ada. Sementara di Saparua, Pulau Saparua itu ada nuri bayan. Nah, ini cuma untuk memberikan gambaran saja bahwa kalau komposisinya itu berubah dari waktu ke waktu, maka kita akan melihat sejauh mana apakah karena sepertinya kalau burung itu kan bermigrasinya sama seperti migrasi dari penduduk ya. dari pulau-pulau lain ke kota Ambon misalnya. Nah, ini contoh-contoh yang nanti bisa dipakai untuk bagaimana kelanjutannya. Baik, selanjutnya slide berikutnya.
Maaf Pak Gun, waktunya tinggal 2 menit.
Iya, ya. Jadi dalam waktu ini bahwa kita sebutkan bahwa untuk semut itu terkait juga dengan ada beberapa jenis semut yang berkorelasi ya terhadap perubahan suhu dan perubahan suhu udara dan tanah. Nah, ini kalau kita akan melihat yang berkorelasi itu ada yang berkorelasi dan ada yang tidak. Nah, ini ada sebutkan beberapa. Ya, slide berikutnya. Nah, ini ada beberapa contoh semut yang peka terhadap perubahan suhu tanah dan maupun udara. Lanjutnya lagi. Nah, Bapak Ibu sekalian, mengakhiri yang saya sampaikan ini, kami dalam riset itu sudah menghasilkan 2 buku, di mana pemimpin risetnya itu adalah Ibu Francina Latumaina, saya sendiri dan Pak John Sausilawani. Kemudian juga didukung oleh Pak Yan Persulesi yang memang punya pakar di bidang burung. Saya kira itu saja yang bisa sampaikan. Jadi yang ingin informasi lebih detail bisa membaca 2 buku ini. Terima kasih. Silakan Pak Agus menutup Pak Agus.
Ya,
ya silakan
next
Pak Agus.
Ibu. Ya, next Ibu. Ya, jadi Bapak Ibu sekalian, ini saya coba gambarkan saja bahwa ada beberapa stakeholder ya ini sebagian kecil saja yang kita dari program studi baik di kehutanan maupun di S2 itu terlibat, misalnya soal-soal penelitian dan pembangunan dengan pemerintah daerah, juga kita sering bersama-sama dengan APIC USAID untuk adaptasi di pulau-pulau kecil dan kemudian membangun roadmap dari adaptasi dan perubahan iklim. Kemudian juga seperti yang sekarang ini kita bekerja sama dengan UBC tentang land and seascape. Jadi sebetulnya memang keterlibatan kita tidak boleh memandang juga melihat darat itu sendiri dan laut sendiri di pulau-pulau kecil, kita harus integrasikan. Karena itu Pak Jeff dan Ibu Intu itu pemikiran-pemikiran yang sudah dikembangkan dari awal dari Ibu Intu dan Pak Jeff untuk pengembangan landscape and seascape. Kemudian di kehutanan ini pembangunan yang cukup intensif yaitu KPH, kemudian social forestry, dan ini yang harus di frame di dalam konsep konservasi biodiversity. Kemudian bersama-sama dengan Pak Ilham dan Bapak Ibu di Bapeda, kita sementara mengusulkan sebuah proposal mangrove ke Green Climate Fund, ya mudah-mudahan itu bisa terjadi untuk kawasan mangrove. Nah, tetapi persoalannya hasil-hasil penelitian ini belum terintegrasi di dalam sebuah konsep yang cukup baik. Jadi kita masih tetap pembangunan sektoral yang sangat eksploitatif. Next. Ya, jadi Bapak Ibu saya kira ini sebuah konsep yang dikembangkan oleh C4, tetapi saya kira ini sangat baik sebagai kerangka berpikir untuk kita membangun konsep konservasi biodiversity dan livelihood di pulau-pulau kecil. Saya kira ini gambaran saja, ini tadi waktu sudah habis, jadi kita lanjut saja nanti
maaf,
Bapak Ibu. Baik, kita lihat saja next slide-nya. Oke, jadi bagaimana dampak kalau kita menjaga biodiversitas kita tetap lestari, maka dampaknya yang sangat baik untuk manusia, juga lingkungan, untuk nutrisi, untuk kultural dan ekonomi, untuk kesehatan, dan juga untuk kendalikan lingkungan. Terus, tambah 1 menit saja Ibu Odi. Nah, saya kira ini beberapa kesimpulan yang perlu kita simak bahwa memang kita harus merubah paradigma dan pemerintah daerah harus memfasilitasi untuk bagaimana kita membangun pulau-pulau kecil ini berbasis pada konservasi. Kemudian semua konsep perencanaan dengan dokumen-dokumen yang tersedia, misalnya RT-RWP, RZ-WP3K, RPJPD, RPJMD, KLAS, itu harus menjadi bagian dan kita harus menuju pada suatu Sustainable Development Goals yang betul-betul dia terukur bagi kehidupan masyarakat dan lingkungan pulau-pulau kecil. Saya kira itu. Terima kasih Ibu Audrey. Mohon maaf itu waktunya lewat. Thank you very much ya.
Okay. Thank you very much Pak Agus dan Pak Gun yang sudah have been presented their talk. We're gonna move to the question and answering session. We have 20 minutes for this part, and there's many questions that have been put on the chat, but we're gonna start first with a couple of questions regarding the collaboration. Ibu Intu and Pak Jeff, during the presentation of Pak John Ines before, there are some questions regarding collaboration that I haven't been asked to John before, but there are questions regarding is there any possible student exchange program between university, Pattimura University and UBC, and also is there any opportunity for lecturer at Pattimura University to do a short course at UBC? Ibu Intu and Pak Jeff.
Yeah, okay,
You
so
can answer.
for exchange program, normally we do have exchange program that exists between UBC and different universities already, including university in Europe, in the US, and there are other programs that I think with other parts of the world, but I think with Indonesia we haven't have that yet. Jadi dengan Indonesia saat ini belum ada exchange program saya rasa, tapi dengan negara-negara lain sudah cukup banyak. Mungkin itu yang bisa kita explore ke depannya ya. Cuman masalahnya kan kembali ke beasiswa. Jadi tadi Pak John bilang kita mesti diskusi soal mencari dana untuk program-program exchange tersebut. Mungkin dari pihak dari Indonesia kita bisa lihat ke LPDP, tapi dari pihak Kanada kita bisa lihat ke pemerintah Kanada seperti Pak John tadi bilang. So I think there are different scheme that we could possibly look into for different exchange program, because we do have exchange program already. So I'm receiving several exchange program students from different universities in Europe in my program as well in international forestry. So they can come for 1 semester or for 1 year and things like that. So yeah, it's just that for Indonesia, we haven't had that occasion yet. I guess if there are possibilities of scholarship, it would be easier, right? So,
So I think we already have something like 200 Indonesian students at UBC, and we have lots of visitors all the time from faculty members from universities all over the world. But they're pretty much all funded, you know, they find their own funding. They get funded individually. We don't have a central system that would fund things. So if faculty members were funded by LPDP, they could come and they'd be welcome. Yeah. If students can get funding, they would always be very welcome if they can meet the entry requirements. But to get some central form of funding would require maybe going to the Canadian embassy in Jakarta and trying to develop a whole program, and we haven't done that yet.
Yeah, and we do get exchange program, like for example, some professors from China who come here for 3 months or for 2 months or for a semester, and then usually provide with space for them to work, but also sometimes they work on writing papers together with different professor here. Or jadi sebenarnya ada banyak kemungkinan yang bisa dieksplor dengan teman-teman dari universitas lain juga sudah mulai banyak berjalan ya, sudah cukup lama sebenarnya. Jadi tinggal melihat kemungkinan fundingnya ya. Seperti Pak Jeff bilang, di sini ada sekitar 200 mahasiswa Indonesia di seluruh kampus UBC. Tapi memang kebanyakan masih dengan biaya sendiri, dan untuk yang beasiswa saya rasa itu yang mungkin harus bisa dieksplorasi ke depannya.
Ya, jadi mungkin juga Ibu Audrey, Ibu
Ya,
Intu, mungkin ini yang bisa kita coba buat proposal bersama ya, mungkin. Sehingga memang artinya program-program yang tadi dijelaskan, terutama joint research itu yang artinya selama ini sudah berjalan, tetapi mungkin untuk beasiswa ini yang atau pertukaran dosen. Nah, tetapi mungkin yang dalam jangka pendek ini sebenarnya dengan online ini, mungkin Ibu Intu, Pak Jeff, Pak John, atau beberapa kolega di UBC, mungkin itu nanti kita coba diskusi dengan Pak Dekan atau Pak Rektor, Pak tadi yang seperti diminta oleh Pak Wakil Rektor 4. Nah, itu sudah bisa berjalan sebetulnya di semester berikut. Nah, nanti baru kita coba atur mekanismenya. Saya kira itu yang mungkin bisa dalam waktu pendek, sehingga kita tidak terputus karena COVID.
Iya, benar.
Sebetulnya pembelajaran ini bisa berjalan ini.
Oke, ya, terima kasih Ibu Intu, Pak Jeff, dan Pak Agus. There's also some people from outside Ambon. There are people from East Kalimantan, Pak Suparjo, Pak Ismet from Lambung Mangkurat, Pak Suparjo from Politeknik Samarinda, Ibu Yohana Tandin Salah from Padamara, Polytechnic Padamara, North Maluku, North Halmahera. They all say that they want to have a collaboration with UBC. I think they're gonna, for the ladies and gentlemen, you can connect, maybe discuss with Ibu Intu later.
Yeah, we would like to come to Halmahera too, of course.
Yeah.
It's in our agenda.
Yeah.
Okay.
Integrated with UNPATTI, Ibu.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to move to some more specific question related to the presentation that all the speakers have done.
And one other thing is also there are several possibilities of scholarship from the World Bank, Pak Agus, but normally it has to be people who already have some work experience. Yeah, so if like young lecturer from UNPATTI or other NGOs or local government who would like to apply, I think if anybody is interested, I could link up with the link and all those things, because we did have World Bank scholarship for some students from Indonesia in the past. So
Hello. Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. There are questions from our dean that regarding Nusa Laut, a small island on the east of Ambon. This island is only 12 kilometers square and consists of 7 villages. Based on the regulation for conservation in Indonesia, every area or island must have 30% area for conservation. The question is, by the collaboration between UNPATTI and UBC, can we develop a conservation area in Nusa Laut Island? Pak Intu, Pak Jeff.
I think it would depend upon what the people on the island of Nusa Laut wanted. So I think our approach to this, if we were to get involved with colleagues from Pattimura, would be to have some sort of discussion with the people on Nusa Laut to see what options would be interesting for them and what they would like to do. And then all these things like the Kawasan ecosystem essential and other things could be explored, and maybe that would work for that island. I've never been there, but it sounds like a really interesting island, so I'd be pleased to go there.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next question is from Pak Suparjo in East Kalimantan for Professor Jeff Sawyer. As you know, cloud cover is high in Indonesia, especially in East Kalimantan. Do you have any experience with the combination, combination between Sentinel and other image would result better information?
I'm not a specialist in remote sensing, but we have the world's leading remote sensing people in our faculty, and they're always getting prizes for new discoveries. So I know that there are all sorts of cloud penetrating images that are now available, and radar and LiDAR and things, but the ones that would work best for East Kalimantan, I can't do. I think you guys know more about that than I do, probably.
Yeah, I think we have colleagues in Indonesia who are GIS specialists who probably would be able to answer that, isn't it? Because they work a lot in East Kalimantan. They're based in Bali, but they do work a lot in Kalimantan. So maybe we could, I don't know, in the future give a link to those people so that, yeah, because I guess it depends on each area, right? So.
Okay, there's also a question from Pa Willem in Nusa Tenggara Timur. He said, in my place, East Nusa Tenggara, there are some aspects that influence conservation, like climate, for water and temperature and land. What is the best way to do and continue or manage some kind of conservation in that area?
I think throughout Nusa Tenggara, there are big problems because the islands are so small that even small changes in rainfall and temperature and marine temperatures will have a big impact.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any simple solution. There will be changes, there will be negative changes probably. I think keeping as much natural vegetation as possible is always a sensible thing to do. And monitoring what changes, trying to learn from what changes. And there are international funds available from different climate change funds to sponsor research on those topics. But there's no doubt that in all of the islands, including Maluku, but especially in Nusa Tenggara, there are going to be big challenges caused by climate change.
Yeah, especially in Nusa Tenggara, it's already drier, isn't it, than in Maluku. So it's going to be even more vulnerable, especially those very small. So it depends on which island, I guess. Yeah, we need to look into that very carefully, isn't it?
Okay, thank you. The next question for Ibu Incu. Indonesia memiliki kekayaan alam yang luar biasa dan keunikan budaya dari tiap komunitas masyarakat di sekitar hutannya, terutama kearifan lokalnya. Menurut Ibu, adakah cara yang efektif untuk meningkatkan kapasitas masyarakat bagi pengembangan kearifan lokal masyarakat tersebut?
Saya memang justru ini bagaimana caranya supaya kita bisa menggunakan kearifan lokal tersebut untuk bisa bekerja sama dengan pemerintah misalnya yang membuat regulasi-regulasi atau policy maker ya kita bilang bagaimana caranya supaya kita bisa menyesuaikan kondisi di setiap daerah tersebut karena kan semua daerah berbeda-beda ya kondisinya, budayanya beda-beda, kondisi alamnya beda-beda. Bagaimana caranya kita bisa melihat supaya ada trade off-nya itu jadi tidak dampaknya tidak terlalu negatif lah misalnya gitu kan. Cuman saya pikir yang menjadi kesulitan itu kan kadang-kadang masyarakat kita di suatu daerah itu di satu desa pun sekarang sudah tidak homogenes lagi ya, masyarakat itu sangat heterogenes saat ini kan. Jadi perubahan-perubahan itu cepat sekali di semua daerah di Indonesia. Jadi keinginan dari masyarakat sendiri pun beda-beda ya, dari kalau misalnya kita tanya bapak-bapak atau ibu-ibu atau kita tanya masyarakat yang lebih tua atau ke anak-anak muda, pasti kebutuhannya beda-beda ya, prioritasnya beda-beda. Jadi itu yang mungkin kita harus mengerti bahwa kita harus bisa menyesuaikan dengan keadaan zaman ya atau perubahan-perubahan yang ada di daerah tersebut dan di mana kearifan lokal yang bisa kita terus pertahankan dan di mana yang namanya science itu bisa membantu dan bagaimana caranya kita bisa melihat kira-kira kita harus bisa memilah-milih gitulah ya istilahnya apa saja yang bisa kita lakukan ke depannya. Apakah itu menggunakan wise practice kita bisa bilang atau adat-adat dan tradisi-tradisi dulu tapi yang harus bisa juga disesuaikan dengan kondisi saat ini ya karena kan semua berubah gitu loh dan sangat dinamik ya, landscape itu sangat kaya dan berubah-ubah terus gitu.
kasih Bu Intu. Berikut ini ada pertanyaan untuk Pak Agus. Bagaimana bisa mendorong pengembangan yang terintegrasi sesuai dengan hasil penelitian, Pak? Silakan Pak Agus.
Ya, jadi ya terima kasih Ibu. Ya, Ibu Audrey. Memang ini saya kira kita semua stakeholder harus bekerja keras. Kalau sekarang ini kan sebetulnya dengan dampak yang ada, saya takut kalau ini tidak didorong untuk ada perubahan-perubahan. Di mana sekarang kan dampaknya selain kesehatan, dampak sosial, tetapi terutama dampak kesehatan dan ekonomi. Nah, ini kalau kita tidak betul-betul menjaga, mendorong, maka sesudah ini pemerintah mungkin menggenjot pertumbuhan ekonomi yang sifatnya jangka pendek. Jadi tetap merusak. Karena itu di dalam apa yang disampaikan hari ini yang kita berharap bahwa semua teman-teman yang ada di universitas, mungkin LSM atau NGO, kita semua harus membangun platform yang sama untuk bagaimana mempengaruhi baik pemerintah pusat maupun pemerintah daerah, sehingga betul-betul kita punya basis-basis perencanaan seperti yang tadi di dalam dokumen itu kita sudah sebut, misalnya tata ruang pesisir dan laut itu kan sudah ditetapkan semua. RPJMD harus berdasarkan pada itu, KLHS, kajian lingkungan strategis, dan betul-betul dia basis pada konservasi, apalagi pulau-pulau kecil. Seperti tadi juga dari NTT, NTB. Jadi memang karena semua orang sudah terbiasa dengan sifatnya eksploitatif, mencari nilai ekonomi jangka pendek, tetapi sekarang ini dampak kalau kita hitung dampak dari COVID, mana nilai ekonominya? Resesi terjadi di mana-mana. Nah, jadi ini kesadaran terhadap konservasi biodiversitas ini harus pertama-tama dimiliki oleh pemerintah. Nah, ini bagaimana caranya kita coba membangun ini sama-sama. Kalau kita lepas lagi, ini kan kadang-kadang keterlibatan kita di dalam berbagai support dokumen atau upaya perencanaan pembangunan yang lama, tetap destruktif, tetap eksploitatif. Dan ini tidak bisa kita lihat bahwa biodiversitas ini punya peranan untuk bisa mengatasi semuanya. Nah, jadi saya kira ini mari kita membangun komitmen bersama untuk betul-betul ya bagaimana kita nanti akan membuat diskusi-diskusi terus menyangkut konservasi ini sehingga mempengaruhi kebijakan-kebijakan pemerintah daerah. Dan yang paling bahaya di Maluku sekarang ini adalah pertambangan. Nah, yang penting sekarang ini bagaimana safeguard sosial, safeguard lingkungan harus ditetapkan sebagai peraturan dasar yang berbasis pada konservasi. Nah, ini duduk lihat sama-sama. Itu Ibu Ordi, jadi teman-teman, mari ini
terima kasih.
Yang tidak kecil sebetulnya.
Ya, terima kasih Pak Agus. Kita run out of time, tinggal 1 menit. Mungkin Pak ada sedikit pertanyaan untuk Pak Gun, mana jenis burung yang endemik pulau dan maupun yang endemik region, dan di saat pandemi ini dihubungkan dengan lingkungan kekayaan ini, laut dan darat, burung dan tumbuh-tumbuhan, kira-kira apa ada pengaruh yang dapat dikontribusikan dalam penanggulangan pandemi COVID. Pak Gun,
baik,
mungkin singkat saja ya Pak, karena waktu terbatas.
Ya, singkat itu semua penanya sudah saya balas di dalam settingnya Bu, jadi saya kira mereka cukup jelas. Cuman untuk pesan aja untuk materi saya yang tadi belum begitu jelas, kira-kira bisa membaca kedua buku tadi. Terima kasih. Ya.
Okay. Thank you very much all the speakers. We run out of time for the presentation and question and answering session. This is very interesting topic, and I think we will not stop here. We should continue our discussion later. And for the participants that still have some questions that have not been answered, we can we can forward the question to the speaker and you can communicate later. For Ibu Intu and Pak Jeff, there are also from Ternate, North Maluku. They say they also want to do collaboration with UBC, and people in Halmahera say they are waiting for you to come in Halmahera. Okay, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, we would like to.
Yeah. We're gonna move to the next session is the closing statement by the speakers. So we have 4 speakers remain here because Professor John Ines already left the meeting, I guess. So each of you will be given like 1 to 2 minutes to have a closing statement for the event today. Please, we start from Professor Jeff Sayer. Jeff, please.
Thank you very much. I think that all I have to say is that I really hope that it is possible for us to travel again soon and to spend time with you. I think there's a lot of willingness on the part of the senior management of UBC to work with Eastern Indonesia, with Ambon, with Pattimura. Certainly Intu and myself, we're going to be promoting that. We're going to be looking for funding to help these things happen. And we really have a lot of plans to do research. We have some research funding now to work on small and medium forest enterprises and on governance issues and also on art. So there are opportunities to fund students and faculty members from Pattimura and opportunities for people from UBC to visit you. So we will give a very high priority to following up on all these things as soon as it once more becomes possible to travel. And thank you very much for organizing this event. It's been really nice to see you all, even if it's only online, and we're very happy that you've done this so that we can remain in contact. And if COVID goes on for long, you're going to have to do this again so we can maintain that contact. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pak Jeff. Ibu Intu, please.
Thank you. Iya, saya terima kasih sekali kepada semua peserta webinar ini dan khususnya teman-teman dari UNPATTI yang mengorganize acara ini. Karena memang kami sedih juga tidak bisa ke Indonesia sudah ini lebih dari 6 bulan. Biasanya kami tidak pernah stay still lebih dari 2-3 bulan di satu tempat. Tapi karena COVID jadi nggak bisa kemana-mana. Dan seperti Pak Agus bilang tadi juga sekarang kondisi makin membutuhkan perhatian lebih baik ya, karena dengan COVID ini kita jadi menyadari bahwa pentingnya kita melihat semua ini secara lebih terintegrasi, karena apa yang terjadi dengan alam akan banyak dampaknya terhadap manusia ya, kepada kita dan kepada kesehatan, kepada ekonomi, kepada itu pun nggak bisa, kegiatan-kegiatan sosial pun tidak bisa gitu ya, nggak bisa ketemu dengan siapa saja. Dan saya rasa yang paling penting mungkin kita harus bisa memikirkan ke depannya nanti gimana caranya supaya bisa kerjasama ini lebih bagus lagi, lebih konkret lagi, karena memang keterbatasan dana mungkin ya saat ini kan yang membuat kita tidak bisa banyak berbuat, Pak Agus ya. Mudah-mudahan nantinya kita bisa lebih ada kemungkinan lebih banyak. Dan saya rasa semua ini yang kita berusaha bangun memang jangka panjang. Saya harap supaya kita bisa terus kerjasama secara jangka panjang, karena memang semua ini harus dimulai dari kecil tapi lama-lama bisa lebih besar ya, kegiatan kita bisa lebih banyak. Dan saya pikir dengan adanya misalnya mentorship, seperti kita bawa mahasiswa dari UNPATTI ke lapangan bersama atau teman-teman LSM di daerah, semoga kita bisa saling belajar bersama gitu ya. Jadi ide-ide untuk ada daerah di mana kita bisa sama-sama ke lapangan, bisa sama-sama bekerja sama melihat kondisi di daerah tersebut, itu bisa menjadi suatu pembelajaran bersama. Dan mungkin juga dengan menulis bersama itu mungkin bisa menjadi suatu jadi data itu tidak hanya nongkrong aja gitu kan di rak buku gitu kan, tapi kalau dengan bisa dipublish, jadi kan semua orang di tempat lain bisa makin tahu mengenai kondisi di Maluku misalnya kan, atau mungkin di Timor atau mungkin di Halmahera, dengan cara kita bisa menulis bersama, apakah itu di jurnal internasional, apakah itu di lebih populer atau membuat video misalnya gitu, pokoknya supaya bisa lebih dikenal lah ya di dunia luar gitu kan. Jadi kondisi kita di sana. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih Bu Intu. Pak Agus,
Ya,
1 minute for closing statement.
Baik Ibu Audrey, Ibu Wilma, saya kira terima kasih atas pertemuan ini luar biasa. Saya lihat partisipan itu kan terus 100 itu, jadi mungkin kita punya skemanya kecil ya, mesti yang 500 ya. Ya, terima kasih Ibu Intu dan Pak Jeff. Saya kira ini penelitian yang kerjasama COVID ini sebetulnya potensi IT online ini kita manfaatkan sebaik-baiknya saja, Bu. Artinya walaupun tidak bisa datang, tetapi mungkin dari kuliah-kuliah kita sekalian ini minta kesediaan Ibu Intu sama Pak Jeff, mungkin Pak John tadi, nanti mungkin Bapak Warek Wakil Rektor 4, barangkali juga dengan Bapak Wakil Rektor 1, dan Bapak Dekan, kebetulan mungkin mudah-mudahan beliau masih ada. Nah, kita coba atur ini. Jadi kerjasama ini juga Ibu kan bukan cuma pertanian sebetulnya. Ini seascape ini memang perlu kita juga kolaborasi dengan teman-teman lain, antropologi, sosiologi, di Fakultas Sosial Politik, juga mungkin keguruan dan sebagainya. Itu kita coba nanti sesudah ini sehingga dengan potensi-potensi yang ada sebetulnya sudah bisa kita mengembangkan banyak hal. Yang berikut memang kita akan buat proposal bersama dan walaupun ini kerjasama dengan UNPATTI, tetapi mungkin kita coba membangun peranan ini untuk bagaimana membangun konsep-konsep landscape dan seascape terkait dengan pemerintah daerah. Seperti yang tadi ada pertanyaan itu, mungkin ini menjadi sebuah konsep yang kita coba bicarakan dengan pemerintah daerah, DPR, supaya memang ada proses kemajuan dari perubahan-perubahan ini. Kalau tidak, kita akan menghadapi ancaman-ancaman yang sangat luar biasa. Kalau yang lalu ancaman gempa, ya kita lokal saja, banjir lokal saja, tetapi dengan pandemi COVID-19 dunia. Dan ini paling bahaya untuk pulau-pulau kecil. Nah, kita tidak boleh lepas lagi dampak ini berjalan begitu saja setelah ya COVID sedikit turun. COVID tidak akan habis ini. Dia akan berjalan terus, karena itu kita harus memikirkan konsep-konsep dasar yang bisa menjadi perubahan ke depan. Terima kasih Ibu.
Ya, terima kasih Pak Agus. Pak Gun.
Baik Ibu, mengakhiri ini saya mau menyampaikan saja bahwa kita semua memang situasinya berubah dengan adanya COVID ini. Namun kalau kita telusuri yang pada intinya itu adalah penularannya kan berasal dari satwa liar yang ada di hutan. Jadi kita mengambil kesimpulan kalau kita mau mengendalikan ataupun mau menyembuhkan ataupun menghilangkan COVID itu, ya kita mestinya mengelola hutan dengan baik, lalu perdagangan satwa liar itu tidak melambah luas ya. Jadi istilahnya kita sekarang ini yang sebenarnya kerusakan itu timbul karena adanya perubahan iklim yang karena faktor manusia. Nah sekarang ini lagi sibuk menyelesaikan COVID-nya, tetapi lupa menyelesaikan sumbernya, yaitu sumbernya yang berasal dari hutan. Saya kira itu saja Ibu Moderator, penyampaian saya. Terima kasih.
Okay, thank you very much for all 4 speakers, Pak Jeff, Ibu Intu, Pak Agus, and Pak Gun. As a token of our gratitude, we would like to say thank you very much and give you a e-certificate. Please.
Terima kasih. Terima kasih semua.
Terima kasih ya. Ibu Intu, terima kasih. Nanti kita kontak terus Ibu sesudah ini.
Ya. Dan kalau ada teman-teman yang ingin tahu lebih banyak tentang kami, you can look at our website Tanah Air Beta ya Pak Agus.
Ya, Tanah Air Beta ya.
Ya, Bapak Ibu jangan dulu keluar, kami sesudah ini nanti saya kembalikan ke, I'm gonna give to the MC and she's gonna lead to the next session. Thank you very much Ibu Intu, Pak Jeff, Pak Agus, and Pak Gun. We give a big applause for all the speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Terima kasih Pak.
Terima kasih.
Terima kasih.
Ya. Pak Jeff, Bu Intu ya.
Terima kasih Pak Jeff, Ibu Intu.
Ya. Sampai ketemu. Sampai ketemu semua.
Baik,
next
kita
session,
ketemu terus.
Yeah. For the next session, please, Mrs. Latuni, time is yours.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Audrey Letemia. Dear speakers and participants, we still have several minutes before closing session. We will have a photo session, and the picture will be captured by admin for every pages. So I would kindly ask you to hold your position. Admin will capture your picture.
Ya, dear
Iguana, ya, ya selamat. Nanti untuk pada marah itu.
Please hear the instruction by admin, please.
Please hold your position, all speakers and participants, in 1, 2, and 3. Okay.
Smile.
Sorry, once again.
Smile.
Sorry, Pak. Okay.
Nah, smile seperti Pak Jeff begitu.
Please hold your position again in 1, 2, and 3.
Pak Jeff.
Ya, seperti Pak Jeff senyum terus. Senyum terus, Ibu.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Ya sayang kami belum bisa ke sana lagi.
Thank you,
Ya,
Evan.
nggak apa-apa, Bu. Kita online saya dulu. Online terus.
We are now.
Gimana kami ingin ke Halmahera juga.
Ya, nanti kita sama-sama, Bu.
We are now move into a closing session. So I will invite Vice Rector of Planning, Cooperation and Information System, Dr. Muspida MSc, to deliver closing speech to Dr. Muspida. Time is yours.
Thanks, the Honorable Rector Patimura University, Professor Dr. M.J. Sapteno. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of today's webinar. I believe that all of us have received many beneficial insight and knowledge, especially information about research collaboration in the field of forestry. I strongly suggest that we have taken important points from the presented material for future development of research the field of forestry. Once again, I would like to say thank you to all speakers, Professor Dr. John Ines, Professor Dr. Jeff Sayer, Dr. Agni Kliantuni Budi Hartono, Profesor Dr. Insinyur Agustinus Castanya, Profesor Dr. Insinyur Gun Mardian Koko. Thank you also to the participant and participating activity until the end of today's webinar. I repeat myself, hope that of us learning something new today. And by saying thanks to God Almighty and officially close today's webinar. See you in the next webinar. Keep safe and healthy. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow.
Thank you, Dr. Muspida.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
For speakers and participants, this is the end of a webinar series 4 held by International Office of Patimura University. We hope the audience could get the beneficial knowledge today. And for your information, the certificate of the webinar and the record webinar as well as material will be sent to you through your email address. And once again, thank you for the Dean and speakers from University of British Columbia. Thank you also for the speakers from Patimura University. Thank you for moderator. Thank you for our rector and vice rector who always supporting us for this event. And for the audience, thank you very much for staying with us until the end of online webinar. We hope we could meet you in the next session, webinar series 5, Netherlands session, September 4, 2020. And don't forget to follow our Facebook page, International Office Universitas Patimura, Instagram, International Office UNPATTI, and YouTube, IO UNPATTI, to get update from us. And I wish you a very good day. Good morning from Ambon to all speakers in Canada. Good afternoon, and see you on next event. Bye.
Terima kasih semuanya.
Terima kasih.
Ya, yang pertanyaannya belum terjawab nanti bisa kita hubungkan ke speaker.
Ya.
Ibu Fancy. Nanti Ibu Fancy bisa berdiskusi dengan Ibu Intu ya.
Siap.
Iya.
Kasih. Iya.
Ibu Intu ya,
Pak
nanti
Jeff,
bisa
Ibu Intu.
lewat email ya Ibu dan Pak ya.
Halo
Ya.
Ibu Intu.
Boleh.
Ya, greeting to
Terima
Pak
kasih
Jong.
Pak Musfida, terima kasih Pak Rektor.
Terima kasih.
Ya.
Bu. Sampai
Terima
jumpa.
kasih Bu
Kapan
Intu,
kamu
Pak
lagi dengan
Jeff.
Prof saya?
Ya.
Ya.
Iya.
Ya, semoga bisa kembali ke sana secepatnya.
Iya.
Terima kasih.
Iya.
Kalau bisa, Prof Intu dari BC menjadi membawakan satu mata kuliah di Universitas Patimura sehingga ada dosen asisten itu dimasukkan di jadwal.
Ya, memang Pak Prof John Ines dia sebenarnya tertarik sekali bisa ikut kami ke Maluku dan dia bilang kalau dia sudah ada mungkin dalam 1 tahun ke depan dia masih agak sibuk, tapi kalau akan ganti dekan dalam 1,5 tahun dia bilang dia bisa ngajar kemana aja dia.
Ada kuliahnya lewat daring aja.
Iya. Yang sekarang kalau daring Bu.
Terus dijadwalkan di Universitas Patimura. Jika di dalam PDD kita sudah terjadwal bahwa kita ada dosen dari luar, dari asing, dosen asing yang mengajar di jurusan kita. Saya berharap seperti begitu ke depan. Jadi kerjasama ini bukan hanya sebatas webinar, tetapi ada implementasi khususnya dalam pengembangan sumber daya. Kita memanfaatkan dosen dari luar itu bergabung. Jadwalkan aja. Jadi mungkin ada pasangan satu mata kuliah dipasangkan seperti Prof Jeff dengan Ibu Intu, mungkin ada satu mata kuliah, lalu siapa pendampingnya di UNPATTI. Ya, mungkin ya 3-4 kali lah atau 2-3 kali mengajar lewat daring diprogramkan. Nah, ini kan sudah terjadwal sebagai dosen asing di Universitas Patimura.
Ya, setuju Pak.
Ya, jadi kayak visiting lecturer, iya.
Ya.
Bapak Jeff dan Ibu Intu, ya. Dengan online, ya kelas jauh.
Iya, iya.
Oke.
Ya, nanti dibicarakan lagi ya ke depan. Iya.
Ya.
Ya. Nanti mungkin bisa dibicarakan dengan lebih detailnya ya Pak Waren dan Pak Agus. Ya.
Ya, baik.
Kalau kondisi sudah COVID-19 ini sudah menghilang dari persada bumi ini ya, mungkin kita bisa jalan-jalan ke UBC juga.
Iya, mantap Pak.
Ya, benar.
Ke UBC ya. Iya.
Iya, bagus.
Bu itu tadi tuh Ibu Fancy yang di International Office juga dia dari Fakultas Hukum, tapi dia penelitiannya juga tentang community di coastal area related to itu juga ya kearifan lokal. Jadi mungkin nanti tadi saya nggak sempat baca pertanyaannya, tapi Ibu Fancy nanti berkomunikasi ya dengan Ibu Intu ya.
Iya. Intu bisa email ya.
Melalui email ya.
Dan kalau memang ada teman-teman yang ingin minta per paper yang sudah keluar, kita bisa kirimkan atau bisa juga lihat di profil kami di website, ada di UBC website atau di tanahairbeta.org juga bisa juga cari dari di situ ya. Baik Ibu.
Oke. Terima kasih banyak Ibu Intu, Pak Jeff. Stay safe and healthy. See you.
Selamat siang ya, sudah di sana, di sini.
Sampai jumpa Ibu Intu dan
Ibu,
Pak Jeff.
Ya.
Makasih Pak Agus.
Terima kasih Pak.
Terima kasih Bapak Ibu
ya.
semua. Iya.
Baik, Pak Agus.
Kapan-kapan ke Ternate.
Lama ini pakai janggut ya.
Saya Pak.
Terima kasih Mas.
Saya Pak Agus.
Pak.
Kalau ke Ternate kontak-kontak.
Baik Pak. Iya Pak. Mantap ya. Nanti
Saya,
kalau
Pak,
beliau
ya,
mau ke sana kita kontak Pak. Ya.
Saya Pak Agus, saya.
Baik.
Ya.
Siap Pak, siap.
Makasih Pak Agus ya.
Ya.
Baik Pak, terima kasih banyak Pak.
Terima kasih Bapak Ibu semua.
Sudah ikut sama-sama ya Pak.
Ya.
Saya Pak, ya.
Oke.
Salam.
Salam Pak. Semua
Salam.
Pak. Ya.
Ibu Ot, makasih Ibu. Kata
Ya,
Bu
Ibu Wil, terima kasih ya. Baik Bu. Lalu Ibu Audrey.
Ya Pak.
Ketum bagian kampanye ketum punya
Tanggal 4. Tapi kayaknya bersamaan dengan IO
tanggal
punya
4,
IO jam berapa ya Ibu Wilma?
Jam 4 sore Ibu. Soalnya
kita jam 10.
9 waktu Belanda.
Sama-sama Bu.
Oh, enggak, kita pagi Pak. Kita punya jam 10 pagi bagus ya.
Oh.
Jadi kita bisa ikut IO punya yang sore lagi. Iya.
Thank you.
Oke, thank you very much.
Jadi habis ini
Maaf kalau
habis
ada
ini kita
kekurangan ya Ibu.
Mantap Ibu.
Bapak.
Perfect.
Ya.
Ya. Habis ini
Ibu
kita
Fancy.
kirim
flyernya Ibu ke semuanya
Iya.
supaya
Pak
banyak
Agus,
yang
Siap,
ikut.
Prof.
Agus,
Ya, ya.
Pak Agus, beta punya pertanyaan gini kan, dulu dengan Kanada tuh kan ada EIUDP, itu kan memang dari SFU, tapi mereka mengembangkan proposal yang akhirnya dibiayaikan oleh pemerintah Kanada. Mungkin ke depan Ketum juga bisa melihat yang demikian dari SIDA kan SIDA.
Iya, betul.
Iya,
Nah,
jadi
habis ini Ibu, habis
Pak.
ini beta kira mungkin melalui Ibu Will, Ibu
ya, Ibu
Wilma,
Wilma, ya.
kita kumpul sama-sama dengan Ibu Revensi juga.
Iya, karena berbagai aspek, ya.
Nah, jadi tidak cuma pertanian, tidak kehutanan, ya, semua.
Jadi lebih umum, jadi bisa.
Landscape ini, ya.
Iya, orang bisa sekolah, bisa short course, bisa exchange student, exchange lecturer, publication,
Beta kira ketua yang mesti ambil, inisiatif, jangan tunggu orang selalu, betul?
Iya, Pak.
Ya, ketua coba kumpul satu kali, supaya ketua coba rancangkan dia program sama-sama, Bu.
Iya, Pak.
Supaya sumber-sumber yang ada juga yang sedang mencari bisa ketua masuk ke sana.
Iya, Ibu Fancy kan juga ada punya pengalaman itu collaboration dengan Belanda dengan itu yang bisa, hal-hal yang bisa diaplikasikan juga di sini tuh Pak.
Jadi Ibu Revensi ketua kumpul satu kali ya, nanti atur ketua KIO lalu ketua diskusi
akan. Juga,
iya melalui Zoom juga bisa. Nanti habis tanggal 4 habis ketua kumpul ya Bu.
Iya. Supaya ada follow up Pak tuh, Iya.
Baik Ibu.
Oke, terima kasih banyak Pak Agus.
Ya. Terima semua support ini acara. Ya, terima kasih banyak.
Ibu Oki dan teman-teman yang lain.
Ya, terima kasih.
Ya, kita keluar ya.
Ya, bye.
Ibu. Terima kasih dah ya.
Ya.
Oke, kita leave.
Bye, terima kasih semuanya bisa ikut.
Atau mesti isi inilah ke Ibu Wilma apa namanya daftar hadir. Batas.
Audrey daftar hadir di mana? Suara otomatis tuh?
Iya, otomatis Pak. Ada tuh ada linknya. Ada linknya di chat Pak.
Oh, link di chat.
Iya.
Saya kalau saya isi juga, saya bapak tuh tetap suara tuh.
Saya mesti isi apa beta kirim ka, beta kopi akan ini.
Ada dari tadi beta ikut yang ada itu buat daftar hadir, cuma ada kuesioner.
Oh nanti beta kirim ke Pak Dodi pun WA
Oh ya boleh.
Akan puling. Sudah tuh Pak Dodi tinggal klik lah isi.
Ibu Odi, selamat siang.
Ibu Nona, selamat siang sampai nanti siangnya.
Jam berapa?
Jam 2 rapat PI. Persiapan benar, oke? Ya.
Oke.
Ya, oke, bye.
Bye.
Ya.
Bye.
Oke, dah.
Dah.
Ibu Audrey kirim di mana Ibu Audrey?
Beta kirim di Pak WA, nanti Pak tinggal klikkan saja tuh.
Oh, WA bukan dari webinar tuh kah? WA
Japri. Di Pak WA pribadi lah Pak, klik linknya saja tuh. Ya. Oke.
Ya.